Hello students, this is Mrs. Lee. I will be reading you the book Flight by Robert Brulé. This book is about Charles Lindbergh and his transatlantic flight from New York to Paris in his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. This book is packed with great figurative language, filled with nice and different uses of mechanics. There's uses of colons and hyphens and different mechanics than maybe you have encountered in your reading. When you see a hyphen, that is generally an author's extended thought. So I will probably stop and point out to you the different uses of hyphens while I am reading this text. I will also, of course, do some thinking aloud. While you're reading, I want you to look at the different evidence of things that Charles Lindbergh does and different things that Charles Lindbergh says to help you draw conclusions on Charles Lindbergh's character. Think about words or attribute traits you would use to define Charles Lindbergh and what evidence from the book you would use to provide an answer for why you selected that character trait. I will begin reading the text now. It is 1927, and his name is Charles Lindbergh. Later, they will call him the Lone Eagle. Later, they will call him Lucky Lindy, but not now. Now, it is May 20, 1927, and he is standing in the still, dark dawn. He watches rain drizzle down on the airfield and on his small plane. The airplane has a name painted on its side, Spirit of St. Louis. Notice there's a semicolon on the last sentence, and in that case, the colon is used to list the name of the plane. I also enjoyed the hyphenated adjective still, dark dawn. In other words, the sun has not risen as of yet. Next page. Lindbergh is nearly as tall as the plane itself, and yet he is about to attempt what no one has done before, to fly without a stop from New York to Paris, France, over 3,600 miles away, across the Atlantic, alone. In this page, you will notice the use of hyphen where he's extending his thought, the author, and you'll notice he used a colon, and with that colon, he is given the example of what his attempt or what no one else has ever done. He's giving more information and extending that thought. Now we're going to move to the next page. He climbs into the box-like cockpit that will be his only home for many, many hours. He clicks on the engine. He listens as it catches, gurgles, and roars. A few friends are here to say goodbye. They are only a few feet away, and yet to Lindbergh, how far off they seem. They look up at him and wave. Good luck! Keep safe! A telephone wire stretches across the far end of the field. To touch this wire will plunge the plane to the ground. There is an extra fuel tank in front of the cockpit. Because of this, Lindbergh cannot see straight ahead. Will the Spirit of St. Louis, with its over 5,000 pounds, rise into the air? To keep the plane lighter, Lindbergh is leaving behind his radio and parachute. Will that be enough? Wow, that shows definite confidence in what he's doing if he's going to leave his radio and parachute behind. He has been up all night getting ready. A thought runs back and forth through his mind. It is still possible to turn back, to return home. And yet another thought is stronger. I have been waiting my entire life for this flight. Lindbergh lowers his goggles and nods his head. Go! Men on each side push to help the plane roll over the soggy ground. The little plane bumps forward, gaining speed. The wheels leave the ground, then touch back. The plane seems to hop, taking its last bow to earth. On the third try, it stays aloft. It soars above the wire by only 20 feet. The spirit of St. Louis rises in the air. It is 7:52 in the morning, New York time. Lindbergh points his plane toward the Atlantic and beyond, toward Paris, over 30 hours away. He gazes down in the morning light. How far off Paris seems across the long ocean. He plans to follow the coastline, flying northeast. The land's edge looks to him like green fingers pointing at the dark sea. To see ahead, Lindbergh pokes a small homemade periscope out the side of the cockpit. Sometimes he flies very close to the water, just 10 feet above the waves. He knows that at this low height, the plane glides more smoothly. The plane drones on. It cruises at about 100 miles an hour. At this rate, he will have enough fuel to reach his destination, but only if he stays on course. Beside him in the cockpit is a little book. He keeps a diary as he goes, all day long, hour by hour. It is as if he were speaking to himself. He wants to remember everything, because no one else will ever really know. At 12:08, he flies above Nova Scotia. Just after 4, he flies above the coast of Newfoundland. And of course, if you don't know this, he's in Canada at this time. At dusk, he looks down and sees icebergs. In his diary, he calls them white pyramids. White patches on a blackened sea, centuries of the Arctic. And centuries are guards, so of course he's using that figuratively. He wonders what lies ahead. The sun sets far behind the plane. Lindbergh flies over St. John's, Newfoundland, the last point of land in North America. Now he can no longer follow the land's edge for direction. He must chart his course carefully. The slightest movement could send him miles off course and risk the fuel supply. He follows 2 compasses and the stars to navigate. As long as the sky is clear, he is safe, but he must stay awake. He writes, "Now I must cross not 1, but 2 oceans, one of night and one of water." Time passes slowly. It is almost 9 at night. Lindbergh's 13th hour in the air. He has completed 1/3 of the flight. Wow, it amazes me how precise he must be so that he can, number 1, analyze the stars and know exactly where he is on his course, but he has to be so precise with that to make sure he has enough fuel for the entire journey. He moves through dense, curling fog, lit ghostly white by the moon. He suddenly enters a huge storm cloud. The plane shimmers, moving up and down in the uniform blackness. He wonders, can I fly above it? Slowly, he soars to 10,500 feet. Here it is clear, but very, very cold. He extends his arm outside the cockpit and feels stinging pinpricks. He clicks on his small flashlight and peers out. Heavy ice has formed on the plane's wings. He cannot risk his instruments icing up. He points the spirit of St. Louis back down. The wings quiver as